Story 1. I am Sarah, a 25-year-old marketing strategist, whose existence had become a grinding cycle of digital deliverables and urban ennui. I had booked a solitary, rejuvenating escape, commencing with the interminable transit from Chicago O'Hare to the vast, cold geometry of Denver International Airport, DIA. Disembarking, I was immediately faced with the dehumanizing ritual of baggage claim. The sheer density of anxious travelers at the carousel was an aesthetic offense. I retreated to a structurally isolated seating area, choosing to observe the slow, mechanical revolution from a distance, favoring profound solitude over the collective chaos. As I attempted to anchor myself in the quiet distraction of my phone, the silence was shattered by a high-pitched, insistent chime. The notification heralded the arrival of 2 unsolicited AirDropped images. The sheer effrontery of the transmission was palpable. The first was an unsettlingly high-angle, quasi-surveillance photograph capturing my ascent up the jetway, the second, a jarringly intimate close-up of my face, caught in the act of concentrating on my screen. Below this second, invasive image lay a caption that injected a paralyzing dread directly into my consciousness. "Where are you going, sweet thing? I'll see you there. The view from up here is fantastic." ***. The audacity of the digital intrusion was a physical shock. I compulsively scanned the terminal's immense, glass-walled space, desperately attempting to pinpoint the source of the transmission, but the swirling crowd of anonymous faces rendered the effort immediately futile. I tried to dismiss the act as a tasteless prank by some bored, delinquent adolescent, yet the proprietary framing and the specific, possessive tone of the caption left a residue of profound, sticky fear. The initial incident was not random, it was targeted. A more primitive, unavoidable necessity then imposed itself. I had to seek the restroom. As a rigorous germaphobe, the very thought of dragging my carry-on backpack into the confined, unsanitary space of a public stall was utterly repulsive. In a catastrophic lapse of judgment born of expediency, I decided to take a reckless gamble, leaving the bag situated on the empty seat, calculating that my absence would be momentary. Less than 3 minutes, 180 seconds, elapsed before I returned, having meticulously completed my necessary ablutions. Just as I reclaimed my temporary station, I spotted my luggage rotating into view on the carousel, instantly recognizable by the small, defiant crimson fox keychain, a solitary flash of identity in the metallic anonymity. I retrieved the suitcase and began to walk briskly, almost running, toward the taxi queue. Then, the notification sound returned, the familiar AirDrop ping, now a harbinger of absolute terror. I opened the file, and a consuming wave of sheer, retching nausea swept over me. This was no surveillance shot, it was an act of complete, invasive psychological violation, a photograph taken directly above the stall partition, capturing me in a moment of absolute vulnerability and exposure within the supposed sanctity of the private space. The accompanying message was a masterpiece of sadistic taunt. "Feel better now, darling? I cleaned up for you. You forgot something important. LOL. ***. The predator had not merely been nearby, he had been positioned directly above me, a silent, gloating witness to my most private moment. The violation was total. A paralyzing fusion of repulsion and immediate, blinding fear rendered rational thought impossible. The prospect of engaging the labyrinthine, indifferent bureaucracy of airport security, of having to articulate and validate the horror of the trophy photo, was utterly unthinkable. My sole priority became immediate, silent, and absolute escape. I bypassed the queues of taxis and summoned an Uber Black, desperate for the swift anonymity of a private vehicle. As the car sped away from the terminal, I sank into the seat, acutely aware that I had just escaped a sickeningly focused hunter. I arrived at my exclusive downtown Denver hotel, where the sheer contrast of the room's luxurious interior and the breathtaking, indifferent mountain skyline view offered a fragile, temporary distraction. After ordering a meal, exhaustion, both physical and psychic, demanded surrender. I was violently dislodged from a shallow sleep during the oppressive darkness of the pre-dawn hours by a loud, metronomic, authoritative knocking at my door. My heart began to hammer against my sternum. "Who is it?" Asterisk asterisk I managed, the word a strained whisper. The response was delivered in a low, gravelly, and fundamentally sinister male voice, utterly devoid of the expected hotel professionalism, room service. We have reason to believe you have misplaced your primary identification card. Asterisk asterisk. The situation was a catastrophic anomaly. The phraseology, the stilted, formal reference to the primary identification card, was entirely incongruous with the chilling raspy texture of the voice. I hesitated, the adrenaline spiking, and told the supposed staff member to wait. I tore through my carry-on, pulled out my wallet, and confirmed that my driver's license was securely in its proper slot. An immediate, cold certainty of impending disaster seized me. The subsequent discovery was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. Tucked deep inside a concealed, zippered compartment of the backpack, I located a small, dark disc, an AirTag. The chilling narrative snapped into place. The predator had meticulously slipped the electronic leash into my bag during the brief interval of my absence outside the restroom, securing my complete traceability. As the horror of the connection flooded my mind, the man outside seemed to instantaneously sense my discovery through the thick wood. The facade of room service disintegrated. He began to viciously, maniacally kick the reinforced door, roaring a torrent of incoherent, guttural obscenities and threats. I am contacting the authorities now. The police are on their way. Asterisk asterisk I shrieked into the phone, dialing the front desk, pressing my body against the wall. Only then did the frantic, heavy rhythm of retreating footsteps register, echoing with a desperate urgency toward the emergency stairwell, culminating in the sharp, distant clang of a heavy security door. I refused to open my door to anyone but uniformed police. Review of the hotel surveillance footage confirmed the threat, a towering, powerfully muscled individual encased entirely in absolute black tactical clothing, a uniform of aggression, with a black balaclava obscuring all identifying features. I filed a detailed, painful police report, furnishing the authorities with the undeniable evidence, the AirDropped photographic violations and the AirTag itself. The police response was noncommittal and procedural, leaving me with the crushing, existential knowledge that the perpetrator had successfully located and physically reached my sanctuary. I checked out immediately, relocating to a remote, undisclosed location, but the psychological contamination persists. My vacation was not merely ruined, it was transmuted into a harrowing, ongoing pursuit. The final, paralyzing fear, the stalker had not only tracked me but had initiated direct, confrontational contact. He had been patiently waiting for the precise, opportune moment to complete his unthinkably sinister agenda. The door, now scarred, remains a visceral monument to the thin barrier between safety and atrocity. Story 2. I am Maya, a recently turned 18-year-old woman, concluding the final, arduous term at my small high school, which is geographically sequestered deep within the primeval, mountainous terrain of West Virginia's Appalachian Range. To commemorate the end of the academic year, our class had been granted a coveted field trip to a massive, sprawling water park complex in the valley below. Due to a profound, crippling bus driver recruitment crisis within the local school district, the very act of securing a driver was considered an immense, fortunate anomaly. The route was familiar, but the promise of escape from the dense, humid mountains was a compelling lure. Our student group was notably imbalanced, with only 4 young women among a significantly larger cohort of young men. The morning of the trip dawned with a stifling, pervasive heat. Boarding the aging yellow school bus felt like willingly entering a hot, contained metal vessel. Our designated driver was a complete cipher, a new face, a man estimated to be in his late 40s, who exuded an atmosphere of complete, ominous silence. His reserved nature, which bordered on the non-communicative, immediately fostered a profound, creeping sense of dis-ease within the confined interior of the bus. I had prudently chosen to wear large, reflective sunglasses, affording me a critical, covert shield of anonymity. Through the dark filter of the lenses, I began to observe his profound, unnerving transgression. He was relentlessly, almost surgically observing my every movement through the wide, convex rearview mirror positioned above his head. The fixation was absolute, intense, and fundamentally predatory. I desperately attempted to intellectualize the gaze, perhaps rationalizing it as mere social awkwardness or loneliness, but the sustained, focused intensity of his eyes forcefully refuted any such charitable interpretation. My friend, Chloe, noticed the taut, rigid anxiety in my posture and leaned over, whispering an inquiry about my well-being. I offered her a strained, forced smile and the promise of a full, detailed recount of the disturbing behavior later. The driver's invasive gaze quickly escalated from a psychological intrusion to a tangible physical danger. Still staring fixedly at my reflection, he executed a sudden, violent swerve, nearly scraping the side of a passing delivery truck. The entire bus lurched violently, everyone instinctively braced against the seats as he slammed the brakes. With audacious hypocrisy, he cast the blame entirely upon the other vehicle, then asked, in a cold, mechanical voice, if we were all intact. We finally arrived at the sprawling, manicured grounds of the water park complex. His final, authoritative instruction was delivered with an unsettling emphasis: we were to leave all personal belongings and backpacks on the bus, only carrying the essentials for swimming. We acquiesced, trusting the mantle of authority, and left our possessions exposed and entirely unsupervised in the now vacant vehicle. Once inside, I provided Chloe with a comprehensive, whispered account of the entire unnerving ordeal. She was appropriately shocked and immediately urged reporting the incident to the administrative staff. I vehemently argued against the idea, citing my fear that my personal distress would ruin the collective experience and cause undue inconvenience. I quickly changed, locking my street clothes in a temporary storage locker. As I began to move toward the central, noisy attractions, a frisson of profound, icy premonition ran down the length of my spine, the sudden, crushing sense of a boundary utterly shattered. I scanned the crowded plaza, and there he was, standing in a rigid, stationary posture, his gaze impenetrably, solely fixed on me from less than 30 feet away. He was not there to swim, he was there to watch. The last remaining vestiges of fear were instantly supplanted by a surge of raw, defiant anger. I marched directly up to him, my voice trembling with suppressed fury, and demanded to know the nature of his problem. He offered a hollow, utterly detached apology, claiming no harm was intended, but his eyes were disconcertingly blank, dead pools that betrayed no genuine emotion or sincerity. He turned and retreated without another word, and I, deeply unsettled but determined to reclaim the day, returned to my friends. The day's intense enjoyment and physical activity provided a powerful, temporary psychological anesthetic, pushing the driver and his suffocating gaze to the furthest reaches of my memory. We were returned to the school later that afternoon, and my father drove me directly home. Utterly drained, I went immediately upstairs to prepare for a deep, restorative sleep. While changing my clothes, a faint, rhythmic, and highly systematic tapping began on my bedroom window, a window easily accessible from a small, low-lying roof section outside. I walked cautiously over, ready to dismiss it as the friction of a tree branch, but upon parting the curtain, I saw nothing but the dense, dark foliage. Just as I started to rationalize the sound, the tapping resumed, louder, more deliberate, and chillingly insistent. In a catastrophic error of judgment born of panicked curiosity, I cracked the window open to listen more closely. This was the moment the trap was sprung. A powerful, unseen hand shot through the opening, locking onto my wrist with a bone-crushing, desperate, vice-like grip, and began to violently drag my body outward through the narrow gap. Reacting with a surge of primal, electrifying self-preservation, I lunged sideways, seized a heavy clothing iron from my nearby desk, and brought it down with frantic, repetitive, desperate force against the attacker's exposed wrist. The brutal, sudden impact forced the individual to shriek and instantaneously withdraw their hand. I slammed and desperately bolted the window shut. My father, alerted by my muffled, panicked scream and the sounds of the struggle, thundered down the hall. He seized his legally held Glock pistol and stormed out the back door, but the night's pervasive darkness had already swallowed the fleeing intruder. As I reached for my phone to dial emergency services, a cold, terrifying system notification seized my attention: warning, unknown AirTag detected moving in close proximity with you. ****. The horrifying truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. the driver's seemingly innocuous instruction to leave our bags exposed on the bus was not convenience, it was a perfectly executed operational setup. He had meticulously planted the silent, electronic tracking device during my time at the water park. I ripped open my backpack and, deep within a recessed pocket, found the small, malevolent disc. My heart was a frantic, desperate drumbeat against my ribs. Although I had no definitive, physical proof linking the device to him, the narrative thread was now irrefutably woven. The strange, silent driver vanished entirely from the school district roster for the duration of the remaining 2 weeks. The terrifying lesson is now permanently etched into my survival instincts. The moment you relax your vigilance and abandon your personal possessions, you are, in effect, handing over the architectural blueprints of your sanctuary to the hunter. Story 3. As a devoted, working father of 2 young sons, my solitary, weekly expedition to the Whole Foods market in the sun-drenched, meticulously managed suburbs of Orange County, California, was a highly prized and non-negotiable moment of psychological reprieve. I secured an ideal, well-positioned spot in the large parking structure and was briefly consulting my digital grocery list when my driver's side window was violently struck. Standing outside was a vast, heavy-set man whose uniform, a grimy, oil-saturated mechanic's coverall, was immediately, and disturbingly, a symbol of social and economic displacement within this affluent locale. I cautiously lowered the window, maintaining a facade of polite composure. His intent was immediately apparent. He pointed to a trivial, almost invisible abrasion on my rear door, offering an unsolicited, instant repair for the scratch and minor dent for a nominal cash fee. I offered a polite, but firmly articulated refusal. His facial expression instantly curdled. He began to argue loudly, aggressively, citing fictitious professional body shop rates, **, over $600. **, and aggressively asserting that his counteroffer of $320 was an unrepeatable gift. I reiterated my refusal with a definitive finality. Sir, I must politely decline your service. Thank you, and I wish you a pleasant day. This final, civil rejection triggered a startling and immediate transformation. His face contorted into a mask of pure, concentrated malevolent frustration, and his tone became instantly agitated, hostile, and laced with menace. He dropped the price to an absurd $200, asserting I was making a grievous, financial error. At this point, my own patience was completely depleted. I delivered a final, cold warning, asserting that my next word would be directed toward the police department. He fixed me with a glare of pure, concentrated spite, mumbled a dark, inarticulate curse beneath his breath, and stomped away, radiating an unnerving aura of petty, powerful entitlement. I struggled to dismiss the bizarre encounter as a mere transient moment of aggressive opportunism and proceeded with my shopping, determined to protect my self-imposed tranquility. An hour later, my cart was fully laden. I transferred the groceries to the trunk, grabbing a few necessary items for the impending 45-minute drive back into the neighboring, less dense town. The sun had completely vanished, the world was now swathed in darkness. Approximately 10 minutes into my drive, a chilling, persistent certainty took hold. A massive, stark white cargo van was maintaining a highly consistent, distant surveillance of my SUV. It mirrored my maneuvers across multiple lanes, always keeping an unnerving gap of approximately 800 feet. I executed an abrupt, unsignaled exit maneuver to test the hypothesis. The van continued straight. I tried desperately to convince myself that this was merely the product of my residual paranoia and the tricks of the deep night. I continued onto a rarely traveled, heavily wooded rural highway. Suddenly, the crimson light of my tire pressure warning seized my attention. The vehicle's handling felt unmistakably spongy and compromised. I pulled onto the shoulder and got out to inspect the tires. Sure enough, the rear passenger tire was rapidly losing air. As a member of AAA, I calculated a minimum 2-hour delay. I crouched down, attempting to deduce the cause of the immediate flat. My attention was drawn to the valve stem cap. It looked strangely cocked and disturbed, slightly ajar. I unscrewed it, and the truth was a physical shock. someone had intentionally and meticulously lodged a small, hard pebble inside the cap before resealing it, engineering a slow, methodical, deliberate leak. The conclusion was instantaneous: the bitter, petty, and deeply aggressive alleged mechanic had exacted his mechanical retribution. But before I could fully process this escalation, I saw headlights rapidly approaching in the distance. The vehicle was driving with reckless, deliberate aggression, using its high beams to intentionally blind me. As it closed the distance, the shape became unmistakable, the same white cargo van from the highway. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, my heart beat a deafening, frantic percussion against my ribs. The van skidded to a stop, and the driver's door opened. A hulking, monolithic figure, not the mechanic, but a man radiating a potent, immediate threat, emerged. He possessed a distinctive, unsettling facial tattoo and utterly towered over me. He asked if I needed assistance. I choked out a desperate, instant fabrication, assuring him I was fine and that AAA was already en route and nearby. He immediately sensed my raw terror and obvious lie. He claimed he had an electric pump in his van and would be right back. I knew this was the fatal juncture. It was a now or never gamble for survival. As he reached the midpoint to the van, the rear cargo door suddenly flew open, and the mechanic burst out, charging toward me, brandishing a large, reflecting machete, a tool of industrial brutality. I threw myself back into the driver's seat, cranked the engine, and slammed the accelerator to the floor. The mechanic brought the heavy blade down in a savage, horizontal arc, chopping the bodywork near the trunk as I squealed onto the highway. In my rearview mirror, I watched both men scramble back into the van. In a final, desperate, yet calculating act, I killed my headlights, a necessary risk on the unlit road. I pushed the wounded car to over 70 miles per hour on a rapidly shredding tire, but the pursuit was relentless. My last, terrifying resort, I slammed the wheel and violently drove the SUV off the highway and deep into the dense tree line, killing the engine and sinking into the absolute, suffocating darkness of the forest. After an eternity that lasted 45 seconds, the blinding, searching beams of the white van tore past my hiding place. The adrenaline was a narcotic, but they missed me. They continued their mad, high-speed pursuit. I waited, then drove the crippled car back onto the highway and limped to the first well-lit gas station to call the police. The responding officers eventually found and retrieved a sophisticated, magnetic tracking box containing an AirTag, a meticulously engineered, temporary tracking solution, attached to the undercarriage of my SUV. They promised to canvass the area and conduct a follow-up. Weeks passed. No arrests. No call back. The official silence was the final, chilling verdict. This was not a petty dispute, it was a calculated, multi-staged, and potentially lethal act of orchestrated retribution and abduction. The fundamental lesson is a constant, cold terror, a simple, poorly chosen word, a moment of perceived defiance, can activate a vast, invisible network of predators determined to exact an unimaginable, fatal price. Really scary stories, every day. Subscribe, like if you like, turn on the bell so you don't miss new videos.